first of our weekend specials, I'm delighted to welcome 4 leading figures from the food industry. With restaurants located in London, Berlin, and the Slovenian mountains, our chef's roundtable today is a diverse and exciting one. We are joined by Asma Khan, Indian-born British chef and owner of the prominent female-run London restaurant Darjeeling Express. Tim Raue, renowned German chef, whose restaurant has been recognized by the world's top 50 best restaurants and with 2 Michelin stars. Anna Ross, self-taught Slovenian chef and head chef at the one-of-a-kind Hiša Franko, and Shamil Thakrar, co-founder of the Dishoom chain, known for its immersive experiences of Bombay in London and long queues. Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm so excited to be hosting all of you.
Thank you.
I wanted to start off by recognizing that actually all 4 of you represent very diverse experiences, perspectives, and kind of disciplines in the food industry. But one thing that all of you and your restaurants have in common is that you kind of aim to tell the story of a certain place. So Shamil, you, I guess, tell the story of this romantic Bombay experience. Asma, your Darjeeling Express is reminiscent of your childhood trips to the Himalayas. And Hiša Franko is kind of this ode to the countryside and has been credited for putting Slovenia on the map. And Tim, your cuisine has been said to have redefined the culinary scene in Berlin. So if I could go to each one of you, maybe starting with you, Tim, and if you could talk us through your project and your goals and the relationships that your restaurants have with these different places.
Yeah, for me, born in Berlin, Germany, we're growing up in Germany. If we go in cooking school with French techniques, French wording, and French cooking. And it was something which I need until today, especially in the skill wording, but it was never my home because French is not German. And then I was searching for nearly 2 decades to find myself in culinary world. And it comes that I get the global head chef for hotel branch located in Singapore. And so I went there and I feel, and not really feel, I dig in deeply in the world of Thai flavors, Japanese products, 1,000-year-old Chinese cooking. And as a tiny, fatty, white German guy, I find myself back in an Asian food world, which I brought back to Berlin and created out of that an absolutely unique cuisine, which has only really one goal. I want to bring fun on the palate. So for me, cooking means is like that you have a roller coaster drive of flavors and aromas on your palate.
So hi to everyone from remote Slovenia. It's all green and in flowers in this moment. So who am I? I'm completely self-taught. I studied international science and diplomacy, graduated, finished the linguistic high school before, coming from a family that is very ambitious, like they wanted me to be the best skier in the world and the best dancer in the world, and of course, like the best diplomat as well. But then as an average girl of that age, I fell in love and followed my heart. So I finished up in a Slovenian countryside with my future husband and his parents that have opened already Gostilna Franko at the time, today Hiša Franko, and like a place really far away. Like, can you imagine more remote? Like, you can't reach it really by driving and having a lot of patience in driving. But I am an optimist, and I really believe that there can be something done with that. So my future husband was treating me, instead of like buying me flowers, he was inviting me for breakfast, lunch, dinners outside, teaching me how to eat. And this is how these like countryside girls started enjoying the food. So when I had to decide between the diplomatic career, which is in my family actually, and cooking, I decided to stay in the remote part of Slovenia and start building up a story that even today is not finished yet. But I think what is really unique and amazing about my story and why today a 7-year-old girl wrote me a huge letter with even like she made a Lego Hiša Franko in her house, is because I think I like by being self-taught, by never cooking, having cooked in any other restaurant, never stashed, I developed completely unique style, which is a kind of funky, progressive, whatever you want, because it doesn't keep to any schools or standards. It's just understanding what a flavor is, what the nature is, what the season is. And I made it somehow. 2017 was my year. I was world best female chef. Today, Hiša Franko is ranking 38 on the restaurant, the best 50 restaurants. So it's a kind of like a big thing. But if you ever asked me before, I would tell you that my dream was not to become someone, but my dream when I started cooking was actually to survive and to show that, you can really, really work on one place, on one ingredient base, and make it real to the world gourmet. So after 15, 16 or 17 years, I don't even know, here we are on this round table. Hi.
I suppose I had been thinking for some time about the relationship between Britain and India in terms of food and in fact in terms of culture. And I guess Britain and India have had a long relationship, right? I mean, it goes back hundreds of years more. I felt like long relationships can get a bit complacent. And I think that British people thought of India in terms of a series of cliches, Bollywood, cricket, Days of the Raj, curry houses, and so forth. And I felt like a lot more needed to be said. And when you go to Bombay, it doesn't conform to any of those stereotypes. It's very different. The architecture is Art Deco and Gothic. The food is not like the curry that you think about as traditional curry house food. And then we sort of, there's this very thin slice of heritage, the Irani cafes, and it's thin and very deep. And it's a beautiful slice of heritage. These cafes were started in the early 20th century by immigrants from Iran to Bombay. And they set up cafes on every street corner because of a Hindu superstition. These cafes are all gone now, sadly. But the wonderful thing about these cafes was that they broke down barriers. Everyone could come in. And we were very inspired by these cafes, by some of their food, their ethos, their aesthetic. And it felt like a very good platform to use to really think again about Indian food and culture in the British context. And so we launched our first restaurant in 2010. We've subsequently launched 6 or 7 more. I'm not sure. I mean, depending on which ones you count during this sort of Corona time. I think we've really done something very fresh and different to Indian food in the UK and in London.
And Asma, going to you finally.
I mean, my whole journey of food was very unconventional. It really is a journey of an immigrant. I came to this country, I had an arranged marriage, and I was married to an academic teaching at Cambridge University. And, if you're not, which a lot of Oxford students will understand, if you're not a student and you're not an academic in these university towns, you're nobody. Because you're this unseen person who, has no existence, because, there's no group that you can actually become friends with. And very conscious of the fact that my husband was a fellow and was teaching at home, I kind of kept away from students who I would have made friends with because it was just not the thing to do. And so I had no one to make friends with. And, I'm talking about Britain 30 years ago, a very different, so, I had no idea what to expect. I'd never seen trees without leaves. And, when I arrived in Cambridge in January, in this kind of stark, cold place, wearing all these beautiful bridal clothes my mother had sent off with me, silks and soft clothes, very little woolen, in my slippers. I actually remember touching the tree and feeling that this tree that was so stark and naked would never have a spring. And I felt I never would have a spring. And then food became my journey. I learned that, I cannot change my situation. I can't change who I've married. I'm trying to make friends with him. I'm stuck in this very cold place. And I didn't know how to cook. And I realized that my one way of going home was to cook. And, at that time, so now when people tell me, I miss my home, you can Skype your dog in Delhi. I mean, it's nothing. At my time, I would have to write letters to my mother and to my father. And my mother never wrote back to me, My father did. I never opened the letter that my father sent me, the last one, waiting for another one to come. I would always save an unopened letter to open when the grief was too much and I missed home. This is what took me to cooking. It was grief, it was homesickness, it was acute loneliness. And I learned when I started cooking that I didn't enjoy the cooking so much, it was feeding someone else. That's how my food journey began in this home, on this table. I started doing supper clubs. I started getting people around here. And, I really, I studied law and I have a PhD in law. I did all of that for the reasons that so many South Asian women do it to please their family, to impress my husband. He's academic. I thought, he'll think I'm smart. Then I realized that this is not a dress rehearsal. This is my life. My life is to feed, not to cook. I love to watch the look of that person's eye. And the first meal I had in Cambridge with a whole gathering of people, in that silence, I knew everybody had gone home in that moment. And they were not South Asian. They just recognized the food that someone had taken patience to cook. It reminded them of food that their mother had made, their grandmother had made. The food I serve at Darjeeling Express, my restaurant, is a homage to women, many of them in their graves. Both my grandmothers are dead. But they, in our culture, we never recognized them. I wanted to create a space where I celebrated the women who never got acknowledged, who never sat on the table with men and ate. In every Indian household, subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, you go to every home, it's a woman cooking. You go to every Indian restaurant, it is a man cooking. And that is what drove me to realize that, I need to be that face. So what you do see is my face, but I'm the face of every woman who never got recognized. Every home cook who cooked and fed a family, not fed, nourished a family, sometimes generations in the same place, and never ever got the applaud, got the acknowledgement, forget the money, never got that feeling that they had contributed to the life of so many people. And this became my kind of dream. I dreamt it every night. I had no money, to open a restaurant or do anything, but I dreamt that I would have a space, an oasis where women could cook together, that you could see the women who cooked. And even though, it was really a dream, somehow or the other, it just worked out. I got a pop-up and then the landlord gave me the place. Very, very, with a huge amount of difficulty, I raised the money to open the restaurant. And then we became successful. And then there was Netflix. So that really is my story. It's really about politics. I wanted the women, not us, me, the ones cooking, but I wanted all these South Asian women to be recognized as healers, as feeders, because we were never, ever. We just people who worked and fed the family. No one turned around and thanked us.
So turning to one of the most crucial aspects for success in the food industry, I guess, is the ingredients. So Anna, I wanted to ask you, you talk a lot about using kind of local fish, the marble trout and the cheese that you find in the Slovenian mountains where you're from, and essentially making your restaurant a cohesive part of the environment that it's in. What do you think the food industry needs to do around the world to make itself sustainable and cohesive with the environment?
Well, I think these questions should have been done like 15, 20 years ago, when we pushed into globalization a kind of too aggressively and with too many ambitions. My example is like a unique example, which has nothing to do with trends or anything. It has just been a simple need. Because those 15, 16 years ago, when I started cooking, I had no suppliers reaching Hiša, Franko. And so to get ingredients to be able to cook with, I had to knock on the doors, but literally knock on the doors and asking farmers or like producers to share products with us. And it has been very tough because this is a mountain community where people honestly are not so ambitious or not even so convinced about, I think the level of, we all would need psychiatrists here to make sure that we realize how amazing we are, how amazing products we are. So these low self-esteem, and of course, like not understanding the quality that farmers had, made sure that it was so difficult to get products from them. So if you want it in all those times, I thought I wasn't lucky at all. It was very difficult because you know how many times it happened, like when I cooked a local lamb and people would be like, "Is this a lamb?" And I would be like, "Yeah, that's a lamb from Dresnica. It's overlooking the Bay of Trieste. It's so beautiful." And it would be, "But it doesn't taste as a lamb. I don't like it. The lamb usually tastes different." So you know how many times I've been through stories to say to people, you know, there is no globalized flavor. Why would we say that the lamb should always taste the same? Are the cheeses tasting the same? Is a butter or a milk tasting the same? Of course it doesn't. It depends on the environment where we are. But you know, to evaluate the produce that you, or the ingredient that you work with, you need to have a woken up environment, or environment with people who are into food and who are interested into food and who are willing to see the difference between, I don't know, New Zealand or Slovenian lamb flavor difference. So it wasn't easy, especially because it was a waking up story, a time that we actually, you know, step by step needed to open all the doors to make us be recognized as someone who cooks well at the beginning, and then just later on as a successful story. Now, of course, today you all see it as a romantic, really successful story. But I can tell you, even today, I feel so much pain in little details. So we are in lockdown, we are in a Corona moment now. And, you know, I really felt where my role in the local environment is really crucial and really important was at the day of the lockdown. I started getting calls from the farmers saying, "My God, Anna, help us. We are having too much milk and we are having too many lambs and we can't milk and we can't do the cheese." And our, you know, when you feel Mother Teresa, you are like, "My God, I'm just a chef. I'm just someone who is usually transforming your ingredients." But you finally understand how important our role can be in an environment that is so vulnerable. So today, I'm understanding the role. The chef has a voice, and the chef today can change things and help the world to be a better place. I'm not a politician now talking about that, but I'm someone with a heart, and I really believe it. And I think that today, if something we can do is to transform these things. So if you ask me what is going to be our future, it's going to be understanding the environments where we live, our seasons and our territories. Of course, in a very different way in the cities, because city is a completely different structure than the countryside is. But today, for me, I must say that I should never say that, and people will hate me. But in a way, I'm grateful for this moment that I had to stop and to rethink things. And we started rethinking them. My team is, for the last 5 weeks, super active, working together with the local farming communities, understanding where the gaps are, understanding what we can do to help them. And we are getting really amazing results. So I'm not saying that this is gonna make us survive, but, and this is something I'm really sure about, it will make sure that in another crisis or another time of a crisis, because it will happen, you know, crises happen all the time, we are not gonna risk to show how vulnerable we are, and we are not gonna risk poverty again. I mean, look, it goes like this. I really am hopeful about that, and the results we are getting day by day, it's a kind of day by day work. It's just incredible. Like, we are probably launching crazy ice creams made out of the high mountain milk with beef products to the whole Slovenia. That's something we are discussing tomorrow. Wish us good luck. But this is how it goes. And this is where we actually show our real role in one environment. Because when everybody's fine, everybody's fine. But when, you know, when we have troubles to live, survive, or we don't know if we have a euro tomorrow, then, you know, you can see who's taking over and who's working hard to make the community live again. So I honestly am grateful for these moments that I never had. But of course, like, I would like to open the restaurant tomorrow.
So while Anna has tried to kind of adapt her restaurant to the environment around her, the rest of you have tried to bring flavors of various parts of Asia to Berlin and London. So Tim, I just wanted to ask you, and then going to you, Shamil, what are the difficulties you've faced in terms of recreating these flavors, in terms of ingredients and training and so on, in Europe?
Yeah, first of what I was starting after I switched to my special, unique Asian kind of cuisine, I needed to connect deeper with the products, and that was in 2006, so now 14 years ago, and it was not that easy to get the products, especially the fresh products, to cook with. So there was no fresh wasabi available or good quality of ginger. So what I did is I was flying to Bangkok, to Thailand, and I meet with a community of farmers, which I'm now connected more than 14 years. And they send it over to us, the products we needed to cook, from morning glory to gailan, so all the vegetables, pomelo, so the fruits. But what happened over the last 14 years was that we created these very unique cuisine, and we tried to implement more and more local products. And nowadays, like, we have a guy, Japanese born, who's living in Berlin, is doing the best miso paste I ever get for money, the best soy sauce. We have a couple, half German, half Thai. The lady is Thai. They started an urban gardening with all the products from Thailand. So I think at least to go in that, or to dig in that flavor world, I normally need to go 3-4 times per year to Asia, especially Singapore and Hong Kong, to come back to that flavor world, because that is what is giving me the most inspiring and is most inspiration, because I love these sharpness of acidity. I like the spiciness, like ants are dancing on your palate, and at least, of course, the ripe sweetness of fruits. And what was really hard at the beginning is that especially the German clients didn't understand it. For them, there was totally new flavors and textures, and especially in Germany, Thai food is the simple and easy dishes. You don't pay more like $10 for one plate. It's the same with Chinese food, and only Japanese had a higher ranking at the first times. And thanks to God that so many Germans were traveling and understand the value we put in that food. But it changed completely and dramatically, I think, with what all of us three have in common, Anna and Asma, is Netflix. Because from that day on, you know, before I was get 2 Michelin stars, and I get all the local awards and stuff like that. But it turned from like having reservations 2 weeks in advance and be fully booked to 3 months. And if we opened the reservation system, it could be like 1 year. And especially if you see now that moment where globalization came to an abrupt stop. And really, from one day to another, it was stopped. There is no flights, nothing. Now you go back to where you are, what you are, and what you want to be. And I don't want to change to be now 100% local, because that's not me. That's not the flavor blood going through my veins. But I think we have to take care more about the local environment, the local producers, the farmers. But for me, it turns absolutely out, even after the crisis, I still will keep the flavor world I have with the dry goods, and with the ingredients I need to cook the way I do, because cooking to me is expressing myself. It is, and this is where I see myself as a kind of an artist. I cannot paint in a way that anyone comes for that or pay for, but I can create dishes with temperature, textures, and especially flavors, which makes people travel hundreds of miles, thousands of miles around the world, and to feed them. And for many, it's not only feeding and nourishing, it's also to inspire them, to give them the ability to go in my culinary cosmos and to see how bright eyes turn out, and they have fun, they enjoy it, and that food is becoming a cultural part as it is in arts, in music. This is something which I love very well, and I think these was the first steps. And if we come out of this crisis, food is even more important, and how we handle animals in a way will change, and I hope dramatically that we have more respect for them and that we're taking care more about them anymore.
Well, I guess the food of Bombay, the tastes and flavors I was very interested in were in many ways the tastes and flavors of my childhood. So I mean, as it happens, funnily enough, my first birthday was in an Iranian cafe. I didn't know this until many, many years later. When my father told me after I'd started the business, and he said, "Do you know your first birthday was in Cooler & Co. In Matunga in Bombay?" And I said, "No, I didn't know that. When were you going to tell me, since I've created this business?" But anyway, so when I was a child, I guess my grandparents used to ferry me endlessly around Bombay and India, I suppose. But those tastes were sort of there for me, and so starting a restaurant which sought to find those tastes again, and part of it was driven by my nostalgia. Like, I'm not sort of apologetic about that. Was a lot of eating. So we spent a lot of time in every part of the city, and then more recently we've distilled that into our book, which is essentially like a travel book and a cookery book combined around Bombay. But we then found all the best dishes that we felt represented the most delicious food that you go to for comfort in Bombay. I mean, it's really Bombay comfort food. Then found the sort of platonic ideal of each of those dishes. So there's a lovely keema pao, and Asma, I don't know if you know this place. It's called Radio Restaurant in Bombay, and it's a sort of Muslim gangsters hangout. And you go in and they all look around at you like this, and it's a sort of pretty dodgy place. It's high ceilings. It's a sort of crazy sort of architecture, and the fans are very high up, and yet the keema pao is just delicious. The sheikh kebabs are very good as well. So we sort of find those different dishes that we love, and then we use those as the inspiration. And I think that in the UK, we had an advantage. I think everything we did, and Asma, I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like we stand on the shoulders of the curry houses. Because in Britain, there is an acceptance of the flavors of India. And you can critique the curry houses, and many do, but I think they're a really important part of British culture. And I think because those flavors were familiar, for us to then bring in these dishes, which people don't really eat pav bhaji, frankly, which is mashed vegetables and a buttered bun together in England or in the UK, it's not really done. But to take those flavors of keema pao, which is minced lamb with a bun, or pav bhaji, which is quintessential Bombay comfort food, but then they're actually quite accessible because people are familiar with Indian food. And so for us to bring those flavors, which have been tried and tested over the decades and centuries as the food that people go to again and again, for us to bring them to London and then to the UK was I think doable. People understood the food relatively quickly, although they hadn't had it before. And so for them, they hadn't eaten this, but they were like, yeah, this makes sense. This is delicious. This is good. And so I think from that point of view, I pay a real credit and tribute to the curry houses. So that's been our journey with food.
Which actually leads me very nicely to a question I was going to ask you, Asma, about how you think Darjeeling Express has been transformatory to the Indian food scene in London.
I think that we are very different from almost all the restaurants that are opened, because they are almost all of them led by men, and everyone who's cooking there, almost everybody had learned to cook in culinary school. So almost every restaurant, the first top level layer of people cooking learned in Indian culinary school, and have had a very similar kind of trajectory of how they move from one place to another. And we are so different, and I think that was what stood out, because none of us, not a single person, I mean, very much like Anna, so I'm self-taught, but the entire kitchen is all self-taught. But the thing is that what is interesting is they all cook the food of my mother and my grandmother, and that I grew up eating. They learned it intuitively. None of us have written recipes. I mean, I really struggled to write my cookbook because I needed my son to measure everything from my hand. So because if I had to think, I cannot cook. I cook instinctively. And this is how, most South Asians will understand. If you ask your mother how you cook anything, she says, put a touch of this and a touch of that. No one has measurements. In my kitchen in London, we have 4 tomato knives We don't have weighing scales. We weigh on our hands. We touch with our fingers. We estimate with our eyes. Nothing is weighed and measured. And, and everything, you look at it and you know it's ready. So that kind of cooking is something quite new. And we were not trying to impress.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to hold you so hard when you walked in, embrace you with my food. I wanted you to feel you'd gone home. And that was the main point. I wanted it to be about an embrace and, introducing you to, you were my guest in my house. Even though you got a bill at the end of it and you paid, I didn't try to open a business. I tried to open a place to celebrate where, London is a city of immigrants. Who was born in London? I've never met anyone who said my granddad was born in London and my father was born in London. I was born in London. Never, ever, ever. So, it's just, we are always looking. And I've said this before that, for me, the country where I first lived in was my mother's womb. And that is true for all of us. When you leave your mother's womb, you also are an immigrant. You're a migrant. You're moving from one place to another. Don't point fingers to me and tell me I'm an immigrant. And recently what was happening, I'm very political. I mean, most people have guessed that. Where race was used and where the word immigrant was used almost like an abuse by our lovely politicians, by the media, where the othering of people. This was my fight back through the restaurant. I will not let anyone hate me because of the color of my skin, my accent, my Muslim name and identity. You've got to sit down on the table and eat my food and listen to my stories. Let me honor you by serving you personally. I personally serve every table in my restaurant, and I clear up as well. And I serve people because I want them to know that I am very honored that they've come. You get up from my table and you want to hate people who look like me, who sound like me. I forgive you. I forgive you. But in your ignorance, you are not allowed to hate me. So for me, food was really a bridge. It had to be the food of my mother, my grandmother. I fed people to talk to them, to make them understand. So next time you see someone like me sitting with you next to your underground, don't flinch. Look at her in the eye because you've eaten on someone's table, someone who looked like her. So for me, this is about taking back, identity. And Tim made this point about, in Germany, people willing to pay for Chinese and Thai food very cheap money. We've always been seen as cheap and cheerful. Ethnic food has always been cheap and cheerful. Japanese cuisine is the only Asian cuisine that was seen as sophisticated enough, so you could charge enough for it. I love what Tim is doing because I think that, we are not cheap and cheerful. Our food has history. Our food has legacy. It's in my DNA. And the problem is that, all of us are pushed together in this kind of, ethnic, happy, cheap food, which is, and I am my restaurant is very inexpensive. You can come in and have a very good meal. The average per head is only 32 pounds, which for the kind of rent I pay is horrible. I mean, my accountant doesn't even talk to me. He hates what I'm doing. I want to be able to open the doors to everybody, because for me, this is not about business. I'm never going to make money. I live off my husband, thank God. But I live off his money and I don't have to pay rent and, I don't have to pay the bills. So he looks after all of that. I am trying to tell a story because I'm not willing to die. And I am going to leave a ripple big enough with Darjeeling Express and our story. So long after they're gone, the idea that some African women, women who are Syrian, Palestinian, whatever their background, can walk into a landlord's office and say, I want to open a restaurant run by women, even if it's not run by women, I want to cook the ethnic food of my heritage. They'll have me as a person they can point out to. When I opened a restaurant, my restaurant, there was nobody like me. And there's nobody like me even in India, which is really sad. An all-female restaurant run by housewives, average age of someone is, in everyone cooking is 50. Mm-hmm. So it was really about, taking back ownership, taking back our dignity. And so the restaurant is, to some extent, a beneficiary of the politics that I believe in.
And this issue of kind of food as a political tool leads me very nicely to my next question, which is to you, Shamil. You kind of bring these flavors of multicultural India and multicultural Mumbai to London. And I was wondering how you think that reflects on a very changing picture of India that we see today, with this growing authoritarianism and these increasing cultural divisions.
I mean, it's a good question, and without necessarily commenting on the politics, what I can say is that look, one of the functions of Irani cafes was, you know, in India, and certainly in Bombay, definitely in India as well, in the early 20th century, dining was very segregated. So Bombay was actually a cosmopolitan city, but if you wanted to eat out and you're a Muslim, you wouldn't generally sit next to a Sikh or a Hindu, and people had very different habits, different things, and they went to different places. And the Irani cafes were the first space where the common man or woman could eat out. And I say women pointedly too, because they were some of the first places that welcomed women as eating establishments. And because the Iranis were outsiders, they had to let everyone in to make their business model work. There was no way they could make money by just serving Parsis or Iranis, because it wasn't enough. And because there were 400 or 500 of these cafes, they were everywhere, everyone came in. And the beauty of that was that it broke down barriers. And for me, something that's deep in our DNA and is being tested, not tested maybe, but I think we'll see it on the other side, but people come together over food. You know, so since we were cavemen, we sat around the fire and we ate, because all the people who didn't want to do that got killed by saber-toothed tigers. So we sort of evolved to be social people in front of a fire and to eat. And I strongly feel that. I feel that in my bones, and I think it's in our DNA. And people did that. They came together. And I think that where the rubber hits the road on the Irani cafes, and I'll sort of come to today maybe in a minute, but is that in 1947, India gained its independence. And one of the great sort of bloodstain at the heart of independence is partition and the violence from partition. And Asma will know this, but Calcutta and Delhi had very bloodstained memories of partition. Bombay was relatively joyous. And part of the reason is, of course, geographic, but part of the reason is also that very cosmopolitan culture that Bombay had, which relied on the shared spaces, people coming together. And one of those shared spaces was Irani cafes. And it must stand to reason that if Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Parsi, Christian are eating together taking bread together, breaking bread, because these places were bakeries, you're just less likely to slice each other up the next day. The violence didn't come there. And I think, to me, we have to carry that forward. India is not a nation, is a nation with many, many different people in it. And Bombay is another quintessential city of migrants and immigrants, people who come there. And I think that if our cities don't mix, they will become very sullen dystopias. So I think even in Dishoom, I'm very proud that we have all sorts of different people. You will see a poor, hard-up student drinking chai all day because we top it up for free after your first cup. You know, Lakshmi Mittal or someone, you know, who's there with his family and maybe he's ordering vintage champagne. And those people need to rub shoulders for society to function, in my view. I think we need more places where we all play together. And for me, that idea that food should bring people together, we carry that further into our menu, where there are dishes of all the different traditions. You know, you'll get a lamb ran, which is a very Muslim dish, or some boti kebabs or whatever, right next to a pav bhaji or a bhel, which are typically more Hindu dishes. And I think that is absolutely how it should be. We need to mix it up, whether it's socially or in terms of religion. And I think that we sort of have to insulate ourselves against new dystopias developing. I mean, you talked about the way India is going, and maybe it's around the world. People do try and split us up, but we need actively to celebrate each other's differences and to come together over food.
And Anna, I just wanted to bring you in here. So to talk about two main things. One, to pick up on what Asma was saying earlier about being a woman in the kitchen, in the professional food industry, which is traditionally a masculine space. And secondly, about you being this ambassador for the new Slovenian cuisine. So yeah, both of those things.
Well, you know, I was so many times asked a question, how is it to be a woman in the kitchen? And I usually always said that maybe they should rather ask me what it means to be a mother in the kitchen, because a woman today, you know, that's a very general term. And I mean, we do exercise, we do workout, we decide not to have families, we decide to dedicate our life to careers. Because intentionally we would like to cook. But I think there is always a compromise that that is possible and about which we should be more talking about. And so in most of my interviews, I always said, don't ask me what it means to be a woman, because a woman today can be stronger than a man, but ask me what it means to be a mother, which on the other side brings so many aspects of responsibilities, of multitasking, of being always guilty somehow. So whether I said, and that's like you've heard it probably, but there is always like a feeling guilty when you're with your family, you are not with your team. When you're with your team, you're not with your family. When you're traveling, you are guilty because you're not supposed to be traveling, because you should be with your team or with your family. So somehow it all goes in a package, and a kind of in a very big burden that women are bringing with us. Do you think I feel okay today? No, I just brought sandwiches to my children before this interview, and I'm like counting and checking the time because they're supposed to have dinner. I'm always caring about someone, and when I work, I don't. And then maybe the situation of coming from a country that almost nobody has heard about. So Slovenia is a small Central European country, which is between Italy, Austria, Hungary, and Croatia. You know how many times I've said it. And in my first food conferences, it was really fun because I always, and it is in my book that just came out, this story is there because I always felt like exotic animal. They were like always considering me being a journalist or someone, and they were like, are you a chef? Oh, no, that's weird, you're a woman. Where do you come from? Slovenia. Oh, but Slovenia has food. And I was like, yeah. Well, yeah, but nobody knows about it because of course nobody knows about the country, so don't do it because you were on the same boat, I guess. But you know what is fun? It's because it's true, because still today, Slovenia still doesn't have a Michelin guide. And we were just about to get it, but then Corona came and Michelin guys said that they will come back later. But however, it's so difficult because whatever you do, you need to convince people that you are better from what they think. Or sometimes, I see the list of chefs invited to a conference, and there is, of course, mostly male, but because it's a male-dominated business, and this is something that I think it's never going to change, and I'm not even discussing that. But then you have like names and then Michelin stars and 50 best position. This is always that. Up to the point when Hiša Franko made it to 50 best ranking, there was always like, I was the only one without nothing. There was like nothing. There was no Michelin stars, no 50 best position. And people were like asking, why should we go and listen to this girl? What does she have to say? Is she really good? Who thinks she's good? There is no parameter that she is really someone. So living as I am, so being a woman coming from a country that is a kind of struggling to enter to as a food destination on the map, but also on a map at all, it's of course like very compromising, and it requires a lot of energy, because imagine like if Tim is cooking amazingly, I'm pretty sure he's having his 2 Michelin stars and he's soon gonna get his 3rd. But like for me, like everything is opening the doors. I can be amazing, I can be the best, I can be whatever, but if you have no one who actually give you credit, it's very difficult. So for me to convince people that gastronomy is something that it's important in, even from a touristic point of view, is really, really huge for my country. So I tell you this story because it's so fun. 2 years ago, they did a list of 100 most influential Slovenians. And before I tell you what happened, you must know that every interview that I give for Slovenian media, I get so much criticism on whatever I say that my son, who is today 17, but he was 15 at the time, he actually specialized on reading my interviews and then the comments, and he was like, Mom, don't read it. Skip it. It's better because you will be so sad. Because Slovenians don't take it, they don't understand gastronomy as something that is really big or important in the life. They take it more as a luxury that comes with the football and whatever. So 2 years ago, there was this list that was published by 600 Slovenian journalists and then edited by all editors-in-chief of the biggest Slovenian newspapers and televisions and so on, of 100 most influential Slovenians. And guess what? The first 6 were sports people. And number 7 was Melania Trump. Number 8 was, because she's Slovenian, number 8 was Slovenian president, and number 9 was me. And I was looking at the list and I was like, what's going on? I mean, can you imagine? Every interview, I'm beaten up. Every interview, whatever I say, because I'm very social critic. I'm critic towards myself, but I believe that criticism changes the society for good. Because if you don't say what we think, and if you don't believe that evolution is important, then we'll always be there, like sleeping somewhere around the corner. So, of course, people don't like to be criticized. So my interviews are always like a patchwork of like, I say something, people are like, bam, Anna said something, and that's like, let's kill her. But then that list came out, and I was like, oh, you see, like I made it in a world where gastronomy means nothing, because in the time of communism, you know how it was. The gastronomy goes with aristocracy. The communism killed aristocracy, and with that it killed the culture of the table. So we had to start from the beginning. So when I was looking at least, I was like, you know what, like we will maybe all forget about it, but I'll memorize it, about like a very important step in a culture of my country, where we understand that like where people work and fight hard for things, they are noticed. And even in gastronomy, which looks like a luxury to most, it's actually possible. So, well, I complicated a little bit the thing, but I wanted to tell you, I'm an exotic animal in a country that nobody knows about, but at the same time, my voice is heard, and well, yeah, and I'm pretty loud, so.
One thing that's really stood out in this discussion is the fact that kind of your work in the food industry has been all-consuming for all of you. It's taken you across the world. It's kind of affected your lives with your families and so on. And Tim, I wanted to come to you here. And you've talked a lot in the past about how food and cooking has been a form of escape for you to the difficult parts of your childhood and your early life. So if you could tell us a bit about that, and tell us about how food still, if it is still an escape for you.
It is not, because I'm now 46 years old and my gangster times are more than 13 years ago. It is still a very nice media thing and people love it to tell the story. But to be honest, you know, it was, if I was young, I give a shit about that, because I didn't recognize that. And it came up in 2006, where I became Chef of the Year in Germany. I was the youngest ever. And there was a media pin board in the biggest street, in the main street of Berlin. And the owners of the hotel I was working in, there was also owning this billboard, and there was displaying my face. And there was some people crossing it, which joining school was me. And there was, yeah, it comes to them that in the past I was a big asshole, a gangster, and a bully. And so there was writing to the most influential newspaper. And these newspapers, they made a story out of, oh, I was on the cover page, so young chef, and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And then they came up with the next day and they told me, you know, we got a lot of phone calls from people which can remind that you were a criminal in your school time. And so I had to tell the story. And while I was doing that, I had the chance for myself to reflect that it comes all because my father abused me. And I was not talking about that because it was a time I was a boy between 9 and 11. And I wasn't a gangster, I wasn't criminal, but my father had big issues with all the women in his life. And I think he had also a lot of personal problems. And he was only beating me up. So he never touched one of the women he was married with. And I didn't give him any reason for that because I'm a very nice boy at that time. So I asked myself if I'm the one who is doing the wrong things, but there was no mistakes on my side. And the problem is, if you abuse a child in that age, you know, it's like a nuclear bomb, which was in my heart, in my stomach. And I became from a victim, the victim of my father, to a very criminal and bad person. And cooking gave me the chance to to put all the aggressions, all the power I had to focus them in what we're doing in kitchen. And you know what I like very much, what was Asma was telling about cooking without measurements. You know, I'm perfectly on a single gram in ingredients. And one of the reasons is that I have 10 restaurants and they have to run without me. But what changed in the last years is that I became from a very, very precise, perfect asshole to a guy who turned his new dishes more in a way like my grandmother was cooking to me, was the big heart, was love. And that love is the most important ingredients from all of them, you know, because if you don't cook with your heart, if you don't be the people who host others with love, if you don't want to feed, to nourish, to hug the people, not even now technically hugging, but taking care about them, give them the nicest atmosphere in a restaurant you can give, and be heartful, no one will come back. They come once and they give you like stars for your technical perfect work. But this is not what is food only for. That is one of the part. And I think this is very a male part. You know, it's like sports and being the best, always driving the fastest car. So I don't have a driver license, very good issue for me also. And on the other hand, you have cooking at home, which is dominated by female. And I think the reason is because female are much more socializing and taking care about the people around them, and male are more looking for being successful. And now in the nice age of 46, I try to find a balance between both. I still want to do perfect dishes, but I want them to be more charming and nice. And this is what I also change with my personality and what you can taste on my dishes. And for me nowadays, it's the biggest applause I can get is if a customer, or even better, a friend, tell me, man, within the last 5 years, your dishes turned from perfectly pedantic dishes into emotional, nicely storytelling, hugging dishes.
Mm-hmm. Great. This leads me to my final question before we take our question from the audience. So there are, of course, huge financial risks and difficulties that come with running a restaurant, and this is only exacerbated by the coronavirus crisis. So I wanted to go to each of you and ask you how it is that you've adapted over the past few weeks to try and safeguard the future of the people who work with you and your restaurant. So if we start with you, Shamil.
I mean, coronavirus, like for us, as for anyone, has been a great shock. You know, we weren't expecting it. I guess it was like something that you could see coming slow motion, but no one really, you know, we didn't really pay attention. I wonder if it's a preview for climate change, but that's a different issue and a large tangent. But we've since then, we've furloughed all of our staff, as I'm sure everybody else has in the UK. And, you know, we're supporting everyone. We've topped everyone up as well. And we're sort of looking to make sure that everyone is okay. But in terms of the finances and how we go forward, it's not straightforward at all. And I think that clearly there is a phase now which is lockdown, and a few people have been throwing the phrase around, this is the end of the beginning in that Churchillian sort of way. But and then there's going to be another phase which looks like, I don't know when it starts, which is some sort of social distancing, plus restaurants allowed to operate. Plus we don't know what support necessarily our people are going to get or we're going to get. And I think somehow in that period, we're all going to have to be very creative about how we work our business models, because we need to get people to be productive. I want to get back to inviting people in and getting them around the fire, the proverbial fire, to see each other and to eat together. But I think we're all going to have to think quite hard about how that works, and in that interim, how we will make money. You know, clearly things like Deliveroo come up, you know, delivery, which I personally, we've not done before. We did a little bit of it, but it's not what we'd like to do. There are other different ways of sort of keeping people productive and working, but fundamentally, we need to figure out how to get our food that people love. You know, I'd like to think people love Dishoom food, and how do we get that to them in a way that respects the priority of the world and the country, which is to get people better and to fight off coronavirus. And that's going to be an interesting challenge. I don't have any answers. We're applying our minds, as everybody else is, I'm sure, and we'll come up with the solutions. And those that will succeed and come through are those that, you know, clearly it's better to have had a good balance sheet. So if you had too much debt, that's already a problem. But those that come through are the ones who are creative, who can really think about how the food can play a role in people's lives, even in spite of coronavirus, and still respect that idea that we all have to get better as a society and fight off this virus?
Well, for me, I mean, the thing is that, it helped a lot that because after Netflix, we were packed till Valentine's next year. So, we had everybody coming to us. We had a very successful year last year, which, the other two who've been on Netflix will know. It's like incredible, people were flying in just to have a meal. And the thing is that, I would have gone and blown that money up. But the thing is that I have a very good Chinese friend who's very prudent, and she forced me to save the money. And that is what has saved me. So I put back all my savings and whatever money I had back into the restaurant. And we are, of course, paying everybody. And, Shamil mentioned this difficulty that we're going to have. But, it's the kind of rents we pay. We cannot open with half a restaurant. I need my restaurant to be full so I can pay the wages and my rent. And, we have a crazy 20% VAT, which till now was okay. But the point is that, we cannot actually survive if we have to come back and open with half a restaurant. So that is not an option. I can't do delivery because it's too much of a faff. It's just not worth it for us. And, our food is very hard to pack, to reheat. There will be boxes exploding in microwaves. I mean, even my own kid can't reheat my food. It just doesn't, it's too difficult to reheat Indian food unless you know how to do it. So, I mean, I can't. And I guess it's a lawyer in me feeling like, oh my God, I'm liable for exploding microwaves. So I'm not going to do it. I'm going to ride it through. I'm going to ride through the storm and, try and help as much as I can. My staff are all paid and, we're going to try and do something interesting. We're still talking about what we can do. I will only open when it is a viable business because I'm not willing to put the lives of my staff at risk till, maybe we have a vaccine or something. It's very difficult times, and the thing is that I put the money into the business. I put my own money back into the business and I'm going to wait it out. I'm going to wait it out because I'm not going to risk opening unless it's safe. And I don't want to be the source of spreading infection or getting my staff sick. And, and my staff are all responsible for 20 to 25 people back in India, in Nepal, and Pakistan. They're supporting half a village sometimes. So, it's not just them who will be sick. It's just, it impacts people who are on the margins of society. These are the people who are working for me over here. They're immigrants. This is what our story is. We send money back. We are the breadwinner of, everyone in the family. So yeah, that complicates the issues. I cannot risk my team. So I will protect them, I will pay them, and we will wait and see when it is safe, we will open.
Anna, you talked about some of the things you were doing earlier. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
So yeah, of course, I have a lot to say regarding that. Nevertheless, where you are, the lockdown is always very difficult. We maybe are in this green jail overlooking beautiful mountains, but it's still a jail. So, but I have to remind you, I went into lockdown with the whole team. To live in Kobarid at Hiša Franko, it means you are completely alone. And so I think for my team already decided to come and work with me is a big life decision because they need to change, from normally more civilized environment to go into a complete forest. So the lockdown of Slovenia has been so fast that me and my family remained here practically with 35 people of the team that couldn't go back home. So to be in a group isolation, it's very good, but it's also not so good. On one way, when you're in a family, because very extreme feelings come out. It's our ups and downs of all of you, I'm pretty sure, are very extreme. Like so one day we are enthusiastic, the other day we're completely down. And then when you're handling this in the family, it's one thing. When this comes in a group that is actually your people that work with you, or people whom you are the boss, it's all much more difficult. So can you imagine, like I have days that I have like nightmares because I don't know what's going to happen next day. But like at 10 in the morning, I have to go in front of the team and I say, I'm like a captain of the boat. So I need to give them indications what to do. So what we did in the house, and I think it was very positive, we tried to save our minds. So we do schooling, we try to understand how to implicate the foraging with the lost farming into something that is real, and it makes us happy, because the little happiness is we're not creating money, but it is in a feeling that we are doing something positive. Mm-hmm. Besides that, I must say Slovenia was one of the countries which, of course, was hurt the least. We actually, even if we are bordering, our longest border is Italy, we locked down so quickly that we had a little bit, something more than 1,000 cases and 70 dead. Very, very limited, and my area is completely virus-free. Mm-hmm. But on the other side, you know, I would like to tell you this. The government made sure that we can breathe in this time. We are paid back 80% of salaries plus all contributions, and that's for the next, I guess, 3 or 4 months. So even they guarantee us a slow reopening. It means that you know, the day I will be able to reopen, I don't need to release all my team. It means that I don't have to fire, which is the most important thing for me. I don't have to fire. Hiša Franko is investing a part. The government is investing a lot, and I'm thankful. This is something that I think is really precious. Another thing that I must say that is somehow important. Slovenia is such a small country that we all a little bit know each other. So to get up to the Prime Minister, it means 3-4 phone calls. So I'm honestly actively present in agreements on rules that we are taking in for the restaurants that we have to reopen. So they're very rational. We actually are following Austrian model, but like I was personally involved into things that are rationally possible to be employed. But first of all, you have to know, I have been safe and healthy, and I made sure I was isolated, that I didn't get the virus. So whichever guest is coming will have to know that I don't want him to make me sick. And that's the first rule that is the most important. Like, if and at the time of reopening, it means I'm safe and you are safe, we can meet. And this is something that must come deep into our mind, because it's not only about the business, because I don't want to risk my family, but I will need to live open, because I risk the life of my employed people in my country if I don't. We have to count on a goodwill of people, and that's really, really important. So I think it's crucial, the consciousness of our action is not just because of us, but it's because of others. So actually, Hiša Franko followed the example of Mauro Colagreco from Mirazur, and we launched reopening on June 3, counting a little bit of internal information that we have, but and doing some mathematics, we probably will reopen on June 3, and we opened the reservation system, and we are waiting what's going to happen.
Yeah, for us, we saw also Austrian as a neighbor, very close to us, and our government see the role and the role model as Austrian and took it over. So we had 1 week to close the restaurant after lockdown, and then we came up with a delivery service. And to be honest, we don't make that bad in April. So we make 50% of the revenue we do normally with the restaurant. Put together all my 5 restaurant concepts, and 4 of them are more casual. 1 is the main place, and in the main place we organized the delivery. And like on the Easter weekend, we did more than 900 dishes per day, and did it as a takeaway. And in Germany, you get from the government only a payment of 60% of the regular salary for the staff, and that is, for them, it's not able to live with just 60%. So that was the reason why we're open, that we're able to give them 80, 90 or 100% as good as the business is doing. And I think that was something with my business partner, Marie, and I created within a week. But it was like a new restaurant opening, a new food concept opening, and that was costing a lot of nerves, power, and energy. So now we're looking forward. In Germany, we're always very, very looking for being secure. We have, I think we are ranked number 5th or 6th in the world with infections by Corona, COVID-19. So we are really, you know, now looking for being secure, and we're thinking if we open 2 weeks after Austrians, it will be in June. But to be honest, my main restaurant is based on 8% clients coming from all around the world, and we will not have that. So we have to watch out if the locals of the Berliners will fill up the restaurant. And to be honest, that will not happen, because Berlin's food scene was in the last 5 years growing enormously because of people coming from all around the world. But they will not come. And we don't know if it started like in September or October that you can fly again. I also operate 4 restaurants on cruise ships. And that was a kind of a business model which was running like hell. But now we don't know if even when it will come up, if it comes up like that. What I think what is the most important thing as an entrepreneur is that you are highly flexible, and that you see a situation and that you start to act immediately, that you don't react. So always being on hand. And this is what I feel for myself, what is the most important thing I have for the entire team and all the stuff around the world and all my restaurants, is being the leader. Even in these moments where the wind is pretty hard and you get a lot of ass kicks and you lose all your money, stand there and be the one to be brave and help them, help others. And I think this is the best thing where we can show up at the moment, to be there if we are business people for our employers and help them every day.
Just very, very quickly, a final question from the audience. This one is from Ethan at Christchurch, who asks, how have you found cooking at home during isolation? So if we start with you, Shamil, we'll go around very quickly.
I'm doing a lot more cooking at home than I've done for a long time, and it's very enjoyable. I mean, we don't have a lot of time because we're busy with, I have 3 daughters, I have homeschooling, plus trying to keep the business afloat, plus now cleaning everything all the time. So there isn't a lot of time, but I've been really loving it. And we've discovered a couple of cookbooks. You know, the roasting tin cookbooks, they're fantastic for quick meals. They make delicious food. We're doing a few more sort of interesting things now and again, but I've loved it. It's really good fun to be back in the kitchen and doing things.
Thank you.
Well, I'm missing, I'd rather feed 200 people in my restaurant than my 2 children. They are a challenge and they're very fussy. And after 4 years, I'm learning to be a mother again. This has been the greatest challenge. It's been very humbling. So all the success and everything that I've had, I realized was so easy compared to reconnecting with my children, cooking for them and feeding them. And they don't say that they're not that grateful sometimes. And maybe not everything I cook is that good. But I'm trying, and I think it's been a great learning curve for me, because it's been a long time since I cooked small meals. And so, yeah, I'm struggling. I look at YouTube sometimes to learn, but yeah, I'm getting better.
Anna, what about you?
Well, for me, cooking a family meal is now cooking a family meal for 35 children that I have around me, because my team is with me. So just today I did it, and I did a polenta with melting cottage cheese with sour milk, and I did sauerkraut with a lot of garlic inside. So we are all gonna smell, but we'll be healthy. And you know what is happening? Because I know this intuitional cooking goes very well to me. Everybody's like, chef, can you cook again tomorrow for everyone? Because it's true, like I really like feeding people. So for me, this is a kind of emotional. So everybody's like just going back and get fat, because I really love it. It's I don't know. I like feeding people. Maybe I should be having 30 children. When Corona is done, I can get more. But that's a time of my life.
Brilliant. Tim?
I do support all the food deliveries around my home, because to be honest, I now have to start very early in the morning, which I definitely don't like. And if I come back in the late afternoon, I'm very gladful that I can order some food from the most beloved restaurants around me. And yeah, that's what I do. Support your local restaurants.
Brilliant. I think that is an excellent note to end on. Thank you all so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure talking to each and every one of you. And all the best for the few weeks and the few months ahead.